it is what it is, right? And I think we're not making any legal conclusions. That's not our job. Our job is to put out there what the facts are, what the truth is, and let the attorneys conclude what they may.
When you know something and you're putting these things together and you're just like, oh my gosh, I feel like this is one of the biggest things in the world.
And this is a story about people who are saying one thing and something else is going on behind the scenes.
Part of what my NGO does is we work with kids from exceptional young people from extreme circumstance.
Who are you when you're off camera? Who are you in the dark?
I don't think I'd want someone to make a film about my nonprofit. You don't want to see the sausage being made.
Because we don't believe victims. We don't believe the less powerful person ever.
This whole time, it's been in plain sight.
Have things that are hidden be made visible. At least you can see the snake now. This is big, right? This is big. How far does this thing go?
What if your greatest enemy was camouflaged, posing in your life? Perhaps your closest confidant, a family member, or a favorite politician. Exploiting your weaknesses, sabotaging your goals, learning your vulnerabilities. And what would you do if they framed you for a crime you didn't commit? What would you do if they turned your friends against you, convinced everyone you were delusional? And what would you do if they hired a lawyer to weaponize a cease and desist against you? Would you stay quiet? What would you do if no one believed you? How far would they go for a lie? And how far would you go for the truth? A true psychological horror story about how our society is shaped, not by left or right, man or woman, religious or secular, but by predators and prey. Follow me down a rabbit hole of manipulation, power, and psychological warfare, where reality is constructed, not communicated. A journey that reshaped my entire understanding of trust, credibility, and ultimately had me asking, what does it even mean to be human? A story of deception, manipulation, and power so sophisticated and orchestrated, it's almost like it was scripted. This is The Unraveling. My name is Mica Ringo. You might know me from season 2 of Shiny Happy People on Amazon Prime. As a teenager, I was recruited into a militant evangelical program called Teen Mania Ministries. In the 90s and 2000s, they recruited high school graduates all over America through their Acquire the Fire concert tour. Interns, as we were called, lived on the campus and worked full-time running the ministry. Outside jobs weren't allowed, and they didn't pay us. We actually paid them, money that we usually raised from church members. Every moment of our lives at that remote campus was controlled. The leadership broke us down through extreme physical abuse and relentless psychological manipulation. As the largest Christian youth organization in America, with annual revenues over $20 million, Teen Mania influenced hundreds of thousands of teens every year.
25,000 evangelical Christians. Thousands of teenagers are gathering tonight for Christian Rally Nation.
The harm was being done on an absolutely massive scale. As a 19-year-old, the psychological and emotional toll of that traumatic experience, and then the subsequent silence and shunning afterwards, it nearly destroyed me. When I finally began to recover, I knew I never wanted anyone else to have to go through that. Not if I could do something about it. But the harm of coercive control was difficult to explain and laid firmly in several legal gray areas. Plus, in our evangelical religious culture, fear and control tactics were normalized. Authority was ordained by God, and our role was to obey, not to question. It's no wonder I couldn't find any government body or legal authority remotely interested in doing anything to stop the harm. Like every other intern, I'd been coerced into signing an oath of silence. We would never portray or allow Teen Mania to be portrayed in a negative light. It's far cheaper than a non-disclosure agreement and more powerful, because if we spoke out, God himself would punish us. At Teen Mania, questions or dissent from the party line was not tolerated, not even online. So in 2009, 10 years after leaving, and when it was at the height of its popularity, I started writing a blog, telling the truth about my experience, made me the first person to break an over 20-year silence.
But a year ago, a former employee gave those who would never return a chance to share their side.
It's absolutely shocking that you could brainwash a child or a young adult to roll down a hill through other people's vomit and somehow think that's a spiritual activity. It just blows my mind.
Micah Marley started My Teen Mania Experience blog 10 years after leaving Teen Mania behind. She didn't know what ESOL was.
Started sending me their stories, and I started seeing these videos, and it was really shocking to me that this kind of abuse can be taking place in broad daylight year after year, and nobody is mentioning anything.
Once I told my story, others joined me. I published almost 100 first-person accounts from former interns and did my own independent investigation and analysis, publishing a post daily, Monday to Friday, for several years. In the comments section, we formed our own little community of truth-tellers and healers, listening and affirming each other after and during years of invalidation and gaslighting. The healing power of acknowledging truth and saying, yes, you did go through that, and it was heinous, and it was wrong, and no, you aren't crazy for saying so. Even though major evangelical Christian leaders continued to vouch for Teen Mania, even though Teen Mania was never forced to admit any wrongdoing, even though no court of law ever found them guilty, even though no one in power ever took our complaints seriously, Teen Mania still went bankrupt. Because once the truth came out, people just stopped going. That's the power of the people. That's the power of the truth. The so-called powerful in our society only derive their power from us, from our consent to their behavior, with our attention and our money. And we can withdraw our consent at any time. After years of healing from and writing about coercive control, I thought I knew how to protect myself from predators. I would have never guessed that someone I trusted, someone I'd worked with, had a long public record of unethical and exploitative behavior. But all of the dots were hiding in plain sight, just waiting for me to find and connect them. Suddenly, I was thrust into a repeat of every trauma I'd already experienced before, beat for beat. From my initial good faith attempts to report the abuse that go ignored and unheard, to the pain of realizing the betrayal and exploitation, to the intense loneliness and isolation after reporting it, and the shock of experiencing an overnight reputation change and loss of friendships. Where do I even start? The story I'm about to tell you feels so bizarre, so unrealistic, so cruel, beyond logic, that if I tell you the bare facts of what I've personally experienced over the last year and a half, your brain will reject it. Unless you have witnessed or seen this type of behavior before, you will not be able to comprehend it because it defies logic. It defies what we know about what it means to be a human. This experience has rocked me to my core and forced me to rebuild my entire worldview. And I'm sharing it with you because it's not actually just about me. It's about the pattern that power uses to dominate and control us. Now, I've seen it up close and personal enough now that I could decode it for you with the hopes that once we can all see the monster, we can all get free. It's the same thing I did when I wrote about Teen Mania. And just like back then, I'm sure plenty of people will be angry at what I have to say, but that's never stopped me before. Because just like I said in the closing moments of the series, you have to stand for the truth and you have to stand for what's right, or else we're going to lose everything. At the end of the day, we cannot let these people silence us. Now, before we go all the way down the rabbit hole, you should know I have a well-documented track record of exposing abusive systems. 0 falsehoods have ever been discovered in my work. And trust me, people have looked. My allegations have always been backed by evidence, and Amazon considered my work credible enough to anchor an entire docuseries. As a whistleblower, I've been threatened, harassed, smeared, but the lies never stick because truth doesn't need armor. It just is. When David volunteered to fight Goliath, they tried to weigh him down with armor, but he refused. He only carried a sling and a few stones. The stones are symbols of truth. Enduring truth, old as the earth itself. The rocks are here before we are born, and they're here after we die. They don't depend on us. They outlive us. They outexist us. They just are. And that's truth. It just is. just like the truth of what I'm about to tell you. So how did I get duped again? We'll get to that, but trust me, I was skeptical from the start. I asked the hard questions, and still, I walked straight into a trap I couldn't see. Because this predator looked nothing like the ones I'd met before. This show is part investigation, part cultural commentary, and part audio diary about waking up inside a coercive relationship and getting the hell out. I'll be drawing on the work of Dr. Karen Mitchell and Dr. Christine Cocciola to understand how these dark personalities operate and how we can reclaim our power, individually and collectively. Because as long as sinners can camouflage themselves as saints, they'll keep wreaking havoc on our planet, and they won't stop until we stop them. You're listening to The Unraveling.
This show is brought to you by Politeness. Are you tired of confrontation? Exhausted by accountability? Then you'll love Politeness. With Politeness, you can sweep abuse neatly under the rug, and voila! The problem simply disappears out of your awareness. Politeness is the revolutionary way to weaponize civility while pretending to care. Now available in 3 strengths. Don't make it awkward. Both sides have a point, and our bestseller, That's Not the Proper Time or Place. Because nothing says maturity like ignoring a crisis gracefully. A product of white supremacy, politeness may cause moral blindness, selective empathy, and suppression of accountability. Side effects include performative allyship and fragile egos. Do not use politeness if you've recently developed a conscience. Politeness, not recommended for people who actually want change.
Before agreeing to work with a TV producer, of course I did my homework. Her press coverage is glowing, and there's a lot of it.
So we're thrilled, absolutely thrilled, of Corey Shepard-Stern, an incredible storyteller and filmmaker. She's finding books at the bottom of barrels and trolling through the internet, and she's been very, very successful at turning those stories into things that many, many millions of people watch.
Oscar-nominated Corey Stern's the producer of this film. Corey is a well-known filmmaker who does feature films in Hollywood so that she can do her passions, which are films like Open Heart. And Corey works with Partners in Health, led by Paul Farmer at Harvard Medical School. And
Corey Shepard-Stern. Corey, you are a filmmaker and changemaker through Strong Heart.
As both a filmmaker and a social entrepreneur, I've been doing medical evacuations of critically ill kids. I also have another nonprofit. We work with exceptional young people from extreme circumstance, and they're from West Bank, Afghanistan, Liberia, and they all live together.
She was everywhere. Nat Geo, ABC's Person of the Week, cameo in a Sundance documentary about a girl escaping child marriage. On paper, Corey Shepard-Stern looked unimpeachable. Filmmaker, humanitarian, and social entrepreneur, arranging medical care for sick children, housing refugees, mentoring former child soldiers. That's extraordinarily difficult work, and Corey loved the extraordinary. The first time we spoke was over Zoom. I already declined them twice, but once I learned the team was behind Shiny Happy People, I agreed to at least talk to them. I was impressed with the first season and thought it was well done. Reliving traumatic experiences for the camera isn't exactly my idea of a fun pastime. And I wasn't willing to do that for someone who just wanted to mine it for sensationalism, without truly understanding the high-stakes tactics of manipulation and exploitation at play. If you've ever seen the Netflix show Umbrella Academy, there's a time-traveling character who goes to the future and gets stuck in an apocalypse. He's completely alone, witnessing the horrors that have befallen humanity without any way to warn others or to prevent the carnage that no one else could see. That's how I felt for years. By the end of that first call, I felt something I hadn't felt before. Relief. At last, someone else finally seemed to get it. Not just the horrific headlines of the most extreme stories, but the insidious psychology that was underneath it, and how right-wing forces of money and power were behind it, and how it was still affecting our country today. Her understanding of that is one of the main things that convinced me to sign on to the project. It's a rare quality in anyone, much less a TV producer. But it never occurred to me that her insight might come from standing on the opposite side of that power dynamic. Because while I was busy exposing teen mania, she had been running her own youth-focused venture involving vulnerable youth with dreams to change the world. One I'd later learn had disturbingly similar patterns. But I wouldn't find that out for another year. I thought I already knew how to protect myself, but I was about to take a very unwanted and unexpected masterclass in covert coercion and the manufacturing of our collective reality. You're listening to The Unraveling. It started the day of my interview. For 6 hours, I sat in the chair, reliving the trauma of teen mania. By the end, I was emotionally spent and physically exhausted. Back at my hotel, I was in full couch potato mode when the director invited me up to her room. It was unexpected, but I went. I enjoyed talking with her, even if her mirroring during filming that day had been a little much. No matter what I'd say, she would jump in enthusiastically with, "Me too!" It felt a little annoying and infantilizing, but I gave her the benefit of the doubt. She was probably just trying to make me comfortable. Taking the elevator up to her room, I wasn't sure what to expect. Was this a personal conversation or a professional conversation? When I arrived, she offered me marijuana edibles, the same ones I'd asked for before filming to help me sleep. We were filming in a state where that wasn't exactly legal. I was annoyed that they'd surfaced now when I no longer needed them, but whatever. Her staff delivered pizza to the room, and the conversation turned personal. Very personal. She told me things about herself that seemed ripped straight out of my life. Every detail, every story, every loss mirrored mine. And I'm a very unique person, so that has never happened to me before. She told me her family thought she was possessed by a demon. So does mine. She grew up in Florida. So did I. She lived in Texas. So did I. Her favorite uncle died of AIDS, and she tragically lost touch with his partner. My dad died of AIDS, and I tragically lost touch with his partner. She even claimed to have previously lived in the same Vancouver neighborhood that I'm in now. I remember the eye contact that night was really intense. Hours of it during the interview, and now more in private. I remember stopping to check in with myself, thinking, what am I feeling? It didn't make sense. I just met her. Why did I feel so drawn to her already? I had never felt anything like it before. It was overpowering and mysterious and exciting. I didn't realize it was my nervous system being hijacked, mirroring and love bombing by someone in power while I was vulnerable, exhausted, and intoxicated. She seemed to make a special point of telling me about queer events and concerts that she'd gone to with other women, never once mentioning a male partner. As a late-blooming queer person of Generation X, this particular social dance is a standard way for queer people to communicate their in-group status to each other without saying, "Hi, I'm Mica, I'm gay, are you gay too?" As the night continued, I asked about the first season of the show. She told me that she'd fallen in love with one of the cast members, Brooke, then told me her heart had been broken when Brooke unexpectedly turned on her. It felt like she was signaling to me a tentative availability and interest in a relationship that went beyond professional bounds, the kind of relationship perhaps that she had had with Brooke. Early the next morning, it's not even 6 a.m. yet, and she's already texting me, continuing last night's conversation. She asks about my ethnicity, then comments on my beautiful hair and skin. I respond with a blushing emoji. It would be more than a year before I learned that the entire Brooke story was fabricated as part of an elaborate plot to emotionally seduce me, profit off my value, and then destroy my credibility. And that's how my nightmare started, disguised as a dream come true. So how did it turn into my worst nightmare? Slowly and confusingly. That's generally how abusive relationships work. They start with an intoxicating charm that hooks you. The director even described our connection to me as intoxicating, twice in that first week. At the time, I took it as a sign of shared, mutual chemistry. But looking back now, I can't help but wonder, was that an admission of intent? Once you're attached, the mask starts slipping in tiny, deniable ways. Negging, passive-aggressive comment, subtle withdrawal. You excuse it as stress or a bad day or just being human. It's easy to keep overlooking it until one day you realize you're living for crumbs of kindness from the same person who's causing you the pain. If predators started out that way, none of us would stay, but they don't. Just like being groomed into the relationship was a process over time, breaking out of it is also a process over time. For me, the final breaking point wasn't when my complaints to the production company went ignored, or when my requests for protection to Amazon were met with silence, or when the rumors spread and friends I'd known for years turned away. It also wasn't the so-called third-party investigation that I asked for, where I felt dismissed and destabilized instead of heard. But everyone has a breaking point. Mine came one Saturday morning in August after the show aired. I opened my mail and found a cease and desist letter sent by the director's attorney. Betrayal was one thing. Interfering in my personal relationships was one thing. But weaponizing the legal system? Accusing me of things I've never done? This was over the line. Reading through 10 pages of my words being twisted beyond comprehension, I was stunned to see myself, being portrayed as the aggressor. In absolute shock, it felt like the ground was moving underneath me, and I wasn't sure how to regain my footing. Now, I'm not someone who does something just because authority told me to. But when a person presents as wounded or traumatized, my instinct is to help, to accommodate, to validate. And among trauma survivors, trust issues run deep. So when the director told me that she didn't want to have to relive the trauma of having her words twisted and used against her by unstable trauma survivors, I immediately offered to delete our text threads. I even set a weekly alarm on my phone, Sunday night at 8 p.m., to clear the thread. By that point, we had been texting almost daily for months on personal topics that had nothing to do with the documentary. We'd even talked about meeting up on vacation together after the show, someplace warm and tropical so we could swim and talk for hours without interruption. I thought we were actually developing a close friendship. Never in a million years could I have imagined that the messages I deleted would later be stripped of context and shown selectively in a way that could paint me as somehow psychotic or dangerous. Now, looking back through this lens, the scope of the operation is breathtaking. Just like the detective in the film Chinatown, who discovers the sinister conspiracy but is unable to stop the incestuous villain from getting away with it. My discovery of the plot was already factored in and accounted for. This was no ordinary conflict. This was premeditated, calculated, scripted. Like a plot twist in a psychological thriller. In my gut, I knew that I wasn't the first person this happened to. The one thing that I keep returning to over and over and over again, the thing I find absolutely baffling about the whole situation, is out of all the people in the whole world, why come after me? Did you not watch the documentary you just made? Stand for the truth, and you have to stand for what's right, or else we're going to lose everything. At the end of the day, we cannot let these people silence us. Did you think that didn't apply to you?
This show is brought to you by Politeness. Are you tired of confrontation? Exhausted by accountability? Try Politeness, the perfect way to protect power while pretending to care. With Politeness, you can ignore injustice, silence survivors, and look classy while doing it. Because nothing says I care like silencing pain with a smile. Politeness, proudly manufactured by white supremacy, and now, for groups and institutions, try Decorum. When honesty makes you uncomfortable, just call it unprofessional. Politeness may cause moral blindness, selective empathy, and suppression of accountability. Side effects include performative allyship and fragile egos. Do not use Politeness if you've recently developed a conscience. If truth persists longer than 4 hours, seek professional silencing. Politeness, not recommended for people who actually want change. Decorum not intended for use in revolutionary environments. I spend weeks reeling in shock. None of this makes any sense.
How can a person I trusted so deeply betray me in such a cruel way? Unfortunately, in America, justice is pay to play. And it doesn't matter how strong your case is. If you can't pony up 40 grand for the lawyer's retainer, you're out of luck. And that's just the entry fee. It doesn't even cover the full fight. I'm going to have to roll up my sleeves and defend myself. This isn't my first rodeo. I've already stood alone on truth against a giant machine of lies before, and I can do it again. In order to defend myself, I need to get methodical. There must be red flags I missed. I need to find and catalog everything in the public record about her and put it in a master timeline so I can see what patterns emerge. It's incredibly time-consuming, and I spend days putting it together. What others might label as obsession is actually a monotropic focus, the capacity of neurodivergent minds for sustained states of focus and analysis. It's a trait that served me well, and I've got to use it again now. I can tell my girlfriend wonders what I'm doing. She cautiously asks me how this internet research is going to help my legal case. I try to explain to her that I need to know all the information in order to be able to fully understand the situation I'm in. I can't really give her a specific answer how it's going to help. And she doesn't say it, but I can tell that she thinks I'm wasting my time, just ruminating and spinning my wheels. I can't explain it, but somehow I know, deep in my bones, that this research is going to help me, even if I don't yet know exactly how. As I begin to organize her interviews and writings chronologically, it's not long before I start noticing inconsistencies between her stories. For example, in an old blog post, she talks about raising money for medicines for Africa, but in a later interview recounting that story, she retells it as if the money she spent was hers. But exaggerating for the press or even lying isn't a crime. It doesn't point to any specific evidence, but it is a pattern, and that points to something. Why would someone consistently misrepresent things? I've got to keep digging until I find the answers. The only place to start is the beginning. Who was she before she was the director of Shiny Happy People Season 2? I don't have to look far to find the origins of her career. In a public Reddit AMA comment about Season 1, she enthusiastically tells us with triple exclamation points that she got her start on Power Rangers.
Just once.
In fact, the director loves talking about her start as a television executive. She references it in many interviews.
But the actual way I got in, I didn't major in this in college. I was an international relations major and a college dropout. And I ended up as a playwright. And then from being a playwright, I was like, wow, it looks like TV executives can make more money than playwrights. And so I became a TV executive.
Now, I'm a 90s kid, but I was raised deep in Christianity, so I don't really know anything about the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers or Haim Saban. It's time for a deep dive on Google, and I am most definitely not prepared for what I find.
Just once.
Who is Haim Saban, anyway? Simon Cowell had this to say about him.
He's scary. He taught me how to be scary. But he is the most loyal person.
Saban is a billionaire regularly on the Forbes richest people in the world list. But he got his start in music production. In the 80s, he and his business partner, Shuki Levy, first broke into Hollywood by producing iconic cartoon theme songs like Inspector Gadget. In the early 90s, he brought Mighty Morphin Power Rangers to America, and it was a monster hit. This sent Haim Saban's net worth into a new stratosphere. The toy and merchandise sales alone hit $1 billion by 1995. And no, none of the actors made a dime off of those sales. In fact, they barely made any dimes.
He's scary. He taught me how to be scary.
The Power Rangers set was a hotbed of abuse.
In 2010, Yost revealed in an interview that he was subjected to on-set harassment for his sexual orientation, and the crew regularly used homophobic slurs when talking about and to the actor.
Basically, I just felt like I was continually being told I'm not worthy of where I am because I'm quote-unquote a gay person and I'm not supposed to be an actor and you can't be a superhero. That's sort of the vibe that I was getting.
This mistreatment led to Yost suffering a nervous breakdown, for which he had to be hospitalized.
As a non-union show, the executives exploited their cast and crew to extreme limits. In fact, the TV show Hollywood Demons recently released an episode about it called The Dark Side of the Power Rangers. It's on multiple streaming services. And maybe you're thinking, that's hardly news. We're finding out now about how abusive Hollywood is to kids. However, the working conditions at Saban Entertainment were so extreme, so physically, emotionally, financially, and psychologically abusive that in 1998, the president of the Screen Actors Guild, Richard Masur, took the unprecedented step of launching a national campaign telling actors, do not work for Saban Entertainment. That's how bad it was. And unfortunately, at Saban Entertainment, the allegations of abuse weren't limited to the workplace. Sarah Brown was a young actress early in her career at Saban Entertainment when Shuki Levy, Haim Saban's business partner, began a relationship with her. Here she is on a podcast.
I went to my girlfriend who had got me in touch with Shuki Levy and with Saban Entertainment and told her that he shoved his tongue down my throat. She said he did the same thing to me. And she was a Power Ranger. So she warned me to be very careful with him, that he would retaliate if I rejected him.
So the retaliation was extensive and long-lasting. She talks more about it here.
And the investigator's first words to me were, is there any reason you can think of why someone would to kill you? And my first words out of my mouth were, Shuki Levy.
He's scary. He taught me how to be scary.
There's so much to Sarah's story that I can't possibly cover it all in this episode, but I encourage you to go look it up because Sarah has something important to say. She had an insider's view into the halls of power that most of us will never see. Instead of playing you an excerpt, I'm just going to read part of her interview here so I don't violate the copyright. Towards the point where I knew I was going to try to get away from him, or I did already get away from him, I called Cheryl Saban, Haim Saban's wife, and I spoke with her. I let her know what was going on, and she did not offer. In fact, she said that she could not be involved and would not be involved. I suspected that he tried to kill me on more than one occasion, and for a woman who dedicates so much of her life to women's causes, it was incredibly disappointing and upsetting for me. And what does this story say about the actual real limits of women's freedom? Why can't a rich and powerful woman help a desperate young girl escaping domestic violence? And Cheryl Saban isn't just any rich woman. Now she's on the board of the directors for the Clinton Foundation. President Obama nominated her to senior advisor to the United States mission to the United Nations, where she worked on issues concerning women and children. She founded the Cheryl Saban Self-Worth Foundation for Women and Girls in 2009. So why did she refuse to help a young woman trying to escape domestic violence? Was she unwilling or was she unable? Neither paints a pretty picture about what's really going on behind the scenes of the curated public image of a persona built on empowering women. Sarah Brown also claimed on that podcast insider knowledge of a deal that was brokered between the Screen Actors Guild and Saban after that little tiff in 1998. She says that in exchange for a donation, Saban was granted 5 more years of non-union working conditions. That means 5 more years of actors getting ripped off and exploited in all kinds of ways. She calls it straight up corruption. Now, I've spent hours reading news and trade publications about the minutia of late 90s television deals, and this is the first time that I've heard this. If what she's saying is true, why has no one else reported it? Are the journalists oblivious, cowardly, or beholden? That's a question we'll return to again. Okay. Trigger warning for this next part. I'm going to read it, and I'm going to be uncomfortable, if that tells you anything. You can go ahead and skip about 30 seconds. She's telling a story about being at a fundraiser for Al Gore. Quote, in Haim Saban's personal private library, I was in conversation with then President of the United States, Bill Clinton, when Shuki shoved his finger into my rectum. End quote. Okay. And she goes on to say, quote, I feel very strongly that it is in the public interest that there is more investigation into some of these things. End quote. Sarah, I could not agree more. I think there absolutely needs to be more investigation. This opens up a lot of questions. If the people at the top are completely immune from prosecution of any kind, then aren't we incenting the people in our society who most want to commit crimes? Aren't we incenting them to go to the top so that they can commit them without impunity? Because that's what seems to be happening right now. stop and sit with the irony for a minute. The director is on Reddit doing an AMA, an Ask Me Anything, to promote season 1 of Shiny Happy People, a show that's about the exploitation of children, like the Duggar children, in reality television and in fundamentalist religion. And she has either the audacity or the obliviousness, and I'm not sure which is worse, to proudly claim Power Rangers and Saban Entertainment as her origin story. A filmmaker who exposes exploitation while carrying its blueprint in her own origin story. That's how cycles of abuse hide and perpetuate themselves, right in plain sight. But I'm not fully made of justice. My compassionate side surges to the forefront, reminding me that we can't paint with too broad of a brush. Just because the people at the top do harm doesn't mean that everybody in the company is complicit. It would be helpful to find something of hers, something that she wrote from that actual time period. I need to understand who she was back then, what she wrote, what she believed, so I start digging some more. Like a kind of modern archaeologist digging through the fossil record, I'm searching the Wayback Machine for evidence of things happened long ago and calcified beneath our conscious awareness. Even when forgotten, they still form the foundation of our existence. Old blog posts, interviews, forgotten press clips, the fossil record of a career. I'll be using a cast of AI voices to help me bring some of this fossil record to life. You'll hear the same voice for all of the director's writings and blog posts. Other articles will be read by a newsman voice. Though she often refers to herself as a screenwriter, I can't find much evidence of that. I can only track down one piece of her writing from the 90s. In 1996, she published a quiz in the trade magazine Animation World. It's a small find, but in archaeology and in investigations, small things can tell big stories. The intro.
Corey Stern provides a test to see if you too can join the executive ranks at the animation company of your choice. Hey boys and girls, have you always dreamed of a career in the glamorous world of animation development, but you just don't know if you have what it takes? It's not as hard as you might think. Here's a simple test to help you determine if you belong in the high-powered world of cartoon creation.
I read it, my stomach drops. It doesn't sound anything like the person I thought I knew. And one of these tactics she used on me. There are 12 questions in total, all in the same tone, but I'm just going to present 3. The rest are linked in the show notes.
Your department is expanding, and you have to hire a new executive. Do you choose? A, the hardworking department assistant who has proven herself bright and capable? B, the smart and creative up-and-comer from a rival studio? C, the CEO's wife's personal assistant in charge of poodle care? At Comic-Con, you've spotted a property that could be the next Smurfs. Unfortunately, your arch-rival at Deep Pockets Productions has also targeted your prize. Do you? A, take the creator out to dinner and convince him that you alone understand his masterpiece?
Oof, I have to admit, that one hurts.
B, powwow with your buddy at the network to try to secure an advance on-air commitment? C, slip your rival some roofies and spirit the creator off to Tijuana for some Cuervo with your business affairs office?
Last question. Saving the worst for last.
In your annual job review, your boss has suggested that you need to work on your ability to come up with merchandisable properties. Do you? A, scour anime expos for the next Power Rangers phenomenon? B, gather a group of hip Gen X ad geniuses to brainstorm new tie-ins? C, offer the god of licensing a sacrifice of 20 camels, a vintage Chewbacca action figure, and your sister in return for a master toy license on your next series?
And consider the context. This wasn't a tiny personal blog. It was a professional trade magazine, Animation World, read mostly by men. The humor glorifies unethical and illegal behavior and frames it as a rite of passage. If it was a joke, it's one that mirrors the very real power dynamics of that era.
So, how'd you score? If you chose mostly A's, congratulations, you'll make a great animation executive. If you chose mostly B's, get your resume ready, kid. You'll do a fine job. If you chose any C's, forget about it, pal. This town isn't big enough for 2 of us.
So her quote-unquote joke pattern is to create a villain doing something outrageous, unethical, illegal, or all of the above, and then wink at the audience as if to say, haha, that's me. Maybe it was meant as satire, but in an industry already notorious for its exploitation, it lands differently. Her bio at the bottom
Corey Stern is a happy but twisted development executive at Saban Entertainment. Her past experience includes pond diving for golf balls, writing musical comedies, and serving as the CEO's wife's personal assistant in charge of poodle care.
Within a year, she was promoted to television executive. I can't help but wonder, was that dog walker to executive line purely a joke or partly true? And if it was true, how much of the rest might also be drawn from real life? These are fair questions, not accusations. But in hindsight, the tone of that quiz feels uncomfortable at best, especially for someone who would go on to work closely with children. The year is now 1997. I'm busy graduating from high school and joining a religious cult called Teen Mania. The director is rising in the ranks at Saban Entertainment. That same year, she created Breaker High, a one-season dud about a high school set at sea starring a young Ryan Gosling. The entire series is on YouTube, so I check out the pilot episode. The show opens on a shirtless boy in the pool, emerging from the water and throwing his hair back before panning over to our main character, Max. Max is laying by the pool, and we start with a close-up of his torso, slowly panning up his shirtless body until we get to his face. It's lingering in a way that is definitely sexual. And what's also weird is how sullen and moody the main character is. He's no Zach Morris, the gold standard of teenage television in the 1990s, and I'm baffled trying to understand why they would make the main character so unlikable. I'd like to watch a few episodes, but the cringe factor is off the charts, and I can't even make it through the pilot. Ryan Gosling's first line is a casual slur against indigenous peoples, and it doesn't get any better from there. It's a good thing this only lasted one season. Remember, again, that's just 1 year before the Screen Actors Guild president issued a public condemnation of Saban for economic exploitation of children and issued a directive urging members not to work on Saban productions until the baseline industry standards for pay and protections were met. The 90s were a different time with different sensibilities. We've all changed since then, right? In 2015, a CNN article featured director Corey Stern reminiscing about her time on Breaker High. And the article said,
"Who wouldn't want to go to school on a cruise liner with Ryan Gosling? That was the dream in the late 1990s when Breaker High, the tale of an ocean-going group of high school students, became cult kids viewing. Breaker High handed Gosling, then 16, his break in TV, playing a teenage nerd trying to get the girl. Corey Shepard Stern created the show. A junior production company worker, when her bosses asked for a companion to Sweet Valley High, Stern pitched the idea and suddenly had an order for 65 episodes, though in the end, 44 were made."
First, CNN calls Breaker High Ryan Gosling's big break. Did the fact-checkers forget he was a Mouseketeer with Brittany and Christina on a little show called The Mickey Mouse Club? Or were they off that day? Neither Corey Shepard Stern nor Breaker High discovered Ryan Gosling. If anything, they were lucky he was free.
That role was one of the very last to be cast, remembers Stern of the Gosling part. Shooting had already started. Ryan went into the audition, and then, somehow, we got his tapes pretty instantly. He was cast in the audition and was sent right to the set. He so nailed it. Here I am, in my 20s, with this dreamboat little 16-year-old. He just had that thing. I remember for our wrap party, we had a party boat in the harbor in Vancouver, and my mom came. Ryan asked her to dance. Ryan Gosling slow danced with my mom. He will have my heart forever.
Then there's the tone. The director is openly romanticizing her own role as an adult producer in her 20s around a 16-year-old actor. Any normal publicist would have killed those quotes, not made sure they ended up in print. Next move, the slow dance with my mom anecdote. Flip the genders, and it reads very differently. Bringing in her mother is a rhetorical laundering device, turning something that would otherwise feel off into something charming. It's also a good example of how the director tends to blur professional and personal boundaries with her cast. And then the closer.
He will have my heart forever.
That line isn't professional respect or admiration. It's possession, objectification, gratification. The focus is on claiming a permanent emotional bond with an A-list celebrity who may or may not even know who she is. Ever the storyteller, the director has narrated herself as the wise protagonist who oversees all. And if CNN prints it, it must be true. But it's about to get worse. if you haven't already, now is the time to buckle up and keep your arms and legs inside the ride at all times, because this is where the wheels start to come off. And trigger warning, if you have children listening or would like a trigger warning for sensitive material, go ahead and skip to the next part. What you're about to hear is currently on the CNN website and has been for the past 10 years. You can go read it for yourself if you zoom in on Ryan Gosling's cast yearbook photo provided by Corey Shepard Stern. Go robot reader.
Time spent on board. Forever. Let's just say I was pure and untouched when I started, and now look at me. Commonly referred to as actor, although this is debatable, hobbies and pastimes, bowling with the Breaker High bowling team, favorite job tasks, packing up equipment after work while the grips get drunk, least favorite job tasks, packing up equipment after work while the grips threaten to violently violate me, number of onset, haircuts, I wear a wig.
Ryan was 16 years old when he wrote this.
While the grips get drunk.
And this is the director's chosen artifact, submitted to a national outlet.
While the grips threaten to violently violate me.
And framed as simple nostalgia. Drinking on the job and threatening a minor with violence, or any harm, is not a joke, and it's never okay. An environment where adults speak that way on a kid's show, even jokingly, shows a dark, disturbing comfort with inappropriate behavior at best and child exploitation at worst. Even if it was meant to be funny, it normalizes a culture where serious misconduct gets brushed off. And it does not escape my notice that the harassment isn't a goal in itself. It serves to compel child labor. Child actors aren't actually supposed to be packing up equipment on any legitimate set. Child welfare aside, it's also a huge safety and liability issue. The CNN article itself raises questions. CNN doesn't normally publish a nostalgic fluff piece on a forgotten Canadian TV show for no reason. So my next step is to look up the reporter. Maybe they have a connection to director. The byline says Ollie Williams. But when I click the name, nothing. No other bylines, no contact info. This is their only article on the entire site. There is a reporter named Ollie Williams in Northern Canada, but they never replied on my email, and it's unclear if it's the same person. And I might have dropped it there, except Ollie Williams also happens to be the name of a reporter character on Family Guy. And as we know from the quiz earlier, the director did have a career in animation. So we've got an irrelevant fluff piece about a long-forgotten TV show written by an unreachable reporter with no other CNN credits, containing multiple factual errors, a misspelling, and no visible attempt to get Ryan Gosling on the record about a very sensitive disclosure. The sloppiness of this story doesn't make any journalistic sense. It reads like a planted piece, not organic reporting. This is what narrative control looks like in miniature. A story shaped to conceal, not to reveal. CNN owes the public, and frankly Ryan Gosling, basic transparency. Was this piece fact-checked and edited? Was it written by a real reporter? Were other sources contacted? And who gets to leverage CNN's credibility to launder a personal narrative? And how often are they doing it? And why plant this story specifically? What's the play? The halo effect of being close to a celebrity? Or is there something darker going on? This material is shocking, to say the least, and I've only just started my research. But I know that by 2015, when this article was published, the director had already been working with vulnerable refugee children for a decade, often in remote areas with little to no supervision. I can only hope their yearbook captions were better than Ryan's. I started this investigation in a desperate attempt to defend myself from false accusations. And now I'm down a rabbit hole I never knew existed, involving powerful people I'm not trying to piss off. If the accounts I'm discovering from that era are true, allegations of sexual misconduct surfacing in elite rooms at high-dollar fundraisers inside the private libraries of powerful men, the same men who are now billionaires lauded as philanthropists in the press, maybe that too is a form of narrative control, designed to conceal and not to reveal. The Wall Street Journal called Saban the Walt Disney of the 1990s, and he used his newfound wealth to support Bill Clinton, aggressively maxing out the giving to his defense fund during his scandal for exploiting a vulnerable young intern. a scandal which is unfairly named after her and for which she suffered mercilessly and unjustly. He was also the top donor to Hillary Clinton. Why? Because just like the right-wing leaders have their agenda for domination and control, and I know because I lived through it, the left has an equally greedy agenda. They aren't hiding it either. Saban, the media mogul, has a systematic three-pronged approach for influencing American politics: fund political campaigns, bankroll think tanks, and control the media. He is telling us that he pays the think tanks to come up with the papers and the justifications for us to think the way that they want us to think. And then he controls the media outlets so that he can amplify his and only his worldview. Wait a minute now, this is starting to sound kind of familiar. When I escaped a right-wing cult, I assumed that meant the other side wasn't also a cult. On the cultural left, we have our own social norms, sacred cows, and our own shunning. And, most chillingly, we have our own pedophiles and rapists in plain sight. And we refuse to see them or hold them to account just as much as the Republicans refuse to see Trump and hold him to account. I'd like to suggest that the problem is not fundamentally ideology. It's people versus predator. People who fundamentally want to dominate, control, and consume others will adapt to whatever ideology is most efficient to achieve that goal within their specific environment. So if they're born in the South, maybe they cling to patriarchal religion for a sense of superiority. But if they're born in California, maybe it's an intellectualist identity that believes in its own inherent superiority. It's time to forget their labels of left and right. We weren't born with those. We were born with an innate capacity for care, connection, and cooperation, while the predators are wired in the exact opposite way. Their care is only camouflage, concealing sinister intentions, and they will never change. Our only hope is to recognize them before they devour us. A lot of us don't actually want to control other people. We just want to live in a community where everyone can get along and cooperate and have a good life together. A place where a rising tide can lift all the boats. So I'd like to suggest a new standard. If you want a rising tide to lift everyone's boats, you are part of the people. If you want to sink someone else's boat and take their stuff, you are a predator. That's it. That's the standard. People versus predators. Because ultimately there are more of us than there are of them. And they know it, which is why they spend so much time weaving this elaborate scam we call our collective reality. Next time on The Unraveling, how your reality is made up. The director scouts for new talent in Africa and opens a home for exceptional children. But what exactly is residential entrepreneurship? And how is it different than slavery? The Unraveling, How Your Reality is Made Up is written, produced, and narrated by me, Mica Ringo. Drawn from the public record, verifiable sources, and my own experience. You can find supporting documentation in the show notes. Join me for a new episode each Saturday